The first story I wanted to talk about tonight involves a scandal that has to do with the Southern Baptist Convention, but it ties in to Biden stepping down and Kamala Harris stepping up and all of that. So here's I've enjoyed this story because it's gone through so many different updates since I started watching the story unfold. So here's what happened. Last Sunday, um, President Joe Biden, as I know you know by now, he dropped out of the presidential race. He announced that he wouldn't be campaigning for office again, and he threw his support behind his vice president, Kamala Harris. She's had a fantastic opening so far. It's been an awesome week. Now, depending on how the next few months play out, what Joe Biden did could be seen as one of the most selfless acts in political history. You know, the most powerful person in the world realized his age was becoming such a liability to the point where not only was he on track to lose the presidential election, the rest of his party was going to suffer alongside him. And so for him to step down saying, I'm not your guy anymore, to read the polls suggesting that the public's not going to give you the benefit of the doubt, to understand things don't look good for your entire party. I mean, was it a selfish thing to stay in the race as late as he did? Yeah, he should have stepped down earlier, but the fact that he did it, big deal. And if you want to say it's a selfless act, like instead of a political convenience, like fine, I'll take it. You know what I mean? Um, and by the way, even though this week has been pretty incredible for Kamala Harris, there was no guarantee it was going to roll out as wonderfully as it did. Now, all that said, one of the most incredible takes on Joe Biden stepping down came from the Southern Baptist Convention, and specifically from Brent Leatherwood, who is the president of the SBC's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, basically the public policy wing of the Southern Baptists. Okay. So he released an essay on, I believe, Sunday night, and it was all about how President Biden made the right decision for himself and America. And I want to zone in on just this little bit he says here. Today, July 21st, in an astonishing moment for American history, President Joseph Biden made the right decision for the country by announcing that he would no longer pursue his party's nomination for president. Yeah. Okay, that seems fine. Like there's nothing controversial about that. And in fact, in advertising what he just said, the ERLC, Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, they actually put out a longer statement on their website. And check this out, because this is where the controversy really happened. This is Brent Leatherwood again. Not only is this a historic decision, it's the right decision for our nation. The role of president takes a heavy toll, and based on what has been apparent for some time, it was unrealistic to ask President Biden to endure another 4 years of the incredible burdens placed on the one who occupies this office. We should all express our appreciation that President Biden has put the needs of the nation above his personal ambition. Despite what some partisans will say, to walk away from power is a selfless act, the kind that has become all too rare in our culture. And like, if you read that, I mean, he gets these little jabs in there, like Biden's old, he can't really do the job anymore. But at the end, he says a pretty standard bipartisan sort of thing. Like, it's kind of rare to see selflessness in politics. It was a nice thing to say about Joe Biden. No snark. He said something nice about it, right? And all these white evangelical Christians flipped out. They went crazy because, as you know by now, many conservatives have basically made it a habit to treat anybody who only agrees with them 99% of the time as their sworn enemies. So, like, I want to be clear, in his essay, the one I was showing you earlier, it was not all praise for like Joe Biden or anyone else. This is in that same essay. Like, look at this, where he's talking about Kamala Harris. Should delegates to the Democratic National Convention confirm her as the nominee, it will be cause for considerable concern among pro-life advocates and those who hold to a biblical definition of marriage. So, Kamala Harris would be horrible because she cares about women and she thinks women should control their bodies. And also, she thinks gay people are people. And that can't happen. So, like this guy in the same essay where he's praising Joe Biden for this selfless thing he did, he's also criticizing Kamala Harris, as you would expect anyone in the Southern Baptist Convention to do. He also said things in here, I'll find it somewhere. But again, he criticized the choice of Harris. He criticized the Republican Party as well for trying to distance itself from anti-abortion extremism. He's one of these people who thinks the Republican Party watered down its stance on abortion in the party platform. And if you actually read the platform, they didn't distance themselves at all. They just couched their language in a different way. So instead of actively saying, we want to ban abortion, we want to ban IVF, we want to make sure fetuses are considered humans, they kind of hid behind language that says, the 14th Amendment supports a personhood amendment. It says fetuses are people, and we think it should be up to the states. And, if they do a national abortion ban, they didn't say those words, but they hinted that that would be the right thing to do. So Brent Leatherwood is basically criticizing the Republican Party for not going all out and saying we want an abortion ban, contraception ban, IVF ban, and all the stuff that they absolutely still believe in. Like, the GOP is as extreme as ever when it comes to abortion. We know that. Donald Trump's VP pick, J.D. Vance, has said he opposes exceptions for rape and incest. He wants 12-year-old girls to have their father's babies if they are the victims of sexual assault. It is extreme as it gets. That is the current Republican Party. But Brent Leatherwood's like, Republicans, you're doing a bad job too. You softened your tone. And they absolutely did not. He actually said in his statement that this is an opportune time. I want to find the wording if I can. Here we go. This is what he said in that statement that was published. Meanwhile, whoa, come back. Why is that website going on? There we go. Meanwhile, this is an opportune moment for all Republican candidates to recommit to the GOP's historic stances on life and marriage, even as the current platform has diminished them. Like, buddy, they are all in against LGBTQ rights. They are all in against any kind of abortion rights, reproductive rights whatsoever. So, like, in the same statement where he's nice to Joe Biden, he's critical of Republicans for dumb reasons. He's mad at Kamala Harris for treating people as people. Like, it's not a great statement. He just happened to say one nice thing about Joe Biden. And yet, despite all of that, Christians flipped out, okay? And what's weird about that is that no one would have expected Brent Leatherwood to say anything nice about Joe Biden, because you know what he was before he was leading the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission? He was the executive director of the Tennessee Republican Party. You cannot get redder than that. He is a Republican through and through. But considering that like 81% of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump in the last election, and like 80% of them voted for him in 2016, the vitriol they directed at Leatherwood for daring to say one nice thing about Joe Biden was kind of incredible. Let me show you some of the stuff they said. This is a lot of these are on Twitter X. This is one of the most dishonest and cynical political statements I have ever seen. No one believes that Joe Biden dropped out due to selflessness. It's almost obscene to utter something so discrediting in a moment like this. And in case you're wondering what she's pointing to, it's just the thing he said, that to walk away from power is a selfless act. And like, even if you think Joe Biden had a political motive to walk away from it, keep in mind, he did not have to drop out. He thought he had a winning record. He thought the American people would turn in his direction, even if the polls didn't show it right now. He did not have to drop out. He earned the delegates. And yet, he was convinced that dropping out would be good, not just for his party, but obviously good for the country too. And he's right. Even if it took him a few weeks to get there, he's right. So, like, that's a true statement. And this person's like, that is dishonest and cynical. She's not alone. Here's another one. This is a powerful Southern Baptist pastor as well. Despite what some partisans will say, nothing in the record indicates Mr. Biden has walked away from power as a selfless act. Nothing. How dare you say something nice about Biden? Wait, there's more. The ERLC is repeating Democrat talking points again. That is very telling. What are the Democrat talking points? That Biden's a good guy who's also old? Like, I promise you that's not on the agenda. This was a good one. Brent Leatherwood should follow Biden's lead and resign also. Like, I'm showing you a handful of crazy statements made, but these people are just saying what a lot of others were also saying online. Like, there was so much backlash against Leatherwood for saying what I didn't think was that big of a deal at all. And then, after all that, this is where it gets pretty interesting. The Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission issued another statement on Monday night. This is 24 hours after his essay went up. Check out this statement at this point. I would show you the original, but it's no longer online. But this is an article about what they said. The official statement said, the Executive Committee of the Board of Trustees for the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention has issued the following statement. In accordance with our bylaws, the Executive Committee has removed Brent Leatherwood as president. Further details as well as plans for the transition will be provided at our September board meeting. Like, that guy was shit canned. And if you have any questions, just chill out for like 3 months while we figure out a reason to tell you all. They fired this guy. And for what? We don't get a reason. We are not told it's because of what he said about Biden. But it kind of has to be, right? Like, this is an article from the Baptist Press, but look at the headline here. ERLC removes president 1 day after kind word about Biden. Like, everyone's pretty much thinking, yeah, they got rid of this guy because he happened to say one halfway decent thing about Joe Biden, which, again, I want to repeat, was not even that big of a deal. It was kind of like, yeah, it's the least you could do. It's a nice thing to say, but like, it's not that big of a deal. It's not controversial. So just to summarize so far, Leatherwood made the mistake of saying something nice about a prominent Democrat while mildly criticizing the Republican Party for reasons he did not need to criticize them for. And all of that was apparently a bridge too far for an organization that has clearly decided right-wing extremism is the only path forward. But, like, it's not like this came out of nowhere, though. The same critics have lashed out against Brent Leatherwood in the past. They don't like this guy. They don't like that he's the head of the ERLC because when conservatives were saying, what else can we do now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned? Hey, how about we put women in jail if they have abortions? And Brent Leatherwood's like, maybe let's not punish the women. Let's go after the doctors instead, which is still an awful take. But they're like, why don't you want to punish the women? We're Southern Baptists. You know how we feel about women. And so they don't like that he wasn't as extreme as they were on that. They also got mad. Get this. Remember last year, there was a school in, was it Tennessee, the Covenant School, where there was a mass shooting. A shooter went into the school, this private Christian school, killed several kids and some adults maybe. Brent Leatherwood has 3 children, I believe, and they all attend Covenant. Now, none of them were injured, physically injured in that shooting, but obviously that is traumatizing, not just for the kids, but for the family. Like, that could have been my son or daughter, right? And so in the wake of that tragedy, Brent Leatherwood, as a very high-ranking Southern Baptist leader, was one of the people that the news media sought out. Like, what do you think about all this? What do you wish would happen? He's still the guy they are talking to because that case is not over yet. And one of the things he said is we should have sensible gun laws in this country because my kids nearly died because we don't have sensible gun laws in this country. And he's right about that. He doesn't go as far as I would, obviously, but he wanted the bare minimum. And they got mad at him about that too. So, like, they've been out to get this guy for a while. And when he made a nice comment about Joe Biden, they went all in against him. One of his more fervent critics is this pastor named Tom Askell. Let me share with you what he wrote after Brent Leatherwood was fired. Not only is this a historic decision, it's the right decision for our convention. Notice he's echoing what Brent Leatherwood wrote about Joe Biden. Despite what some will say, for the trustees to remove Brent from this position of power is a righteous act, the kind that has become all too rare among trustees in our recent SBC culture. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Nothing symbolizes a religious group that is devoted to the patriarchy more than a giant dick. And that's what that guy is. Now, another thing you should know if you're not familiar with the ERLC is the only reason Brent Leatherwood is even in that role is because the guy who was in his position for like the decade before was a guy named Russell Moore. And he stepped away from the job after everyone came after him. Why? Because Russell Moore spent years saying, hey, we're Christians. We have values, damn it. I mean, they're all bigots, but like we have values. And Donald Trump is not a guy who cares about our values. And you know what? He's right. Trump doesn't care about any of that stuff. Russell Moore condemned sexual abuse that was rampant within the Southern Baptist Convention. He called for racial justice in the wake of the George Floyd murder. So, like, yeah, he was also anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ rights, but he was critical of Donald Trump. And then a whole bunch of pastors said, we are going to stop funding the Southern Baptist Convention if you don't get rid of him. And ultimately, Russell Moore resigned as well. Like, the people in this position to be like the voice for what ethics the Southern Baptist Convention ought to have, they're targets themselves, right? And Russell Moore chimed in, by the way, when he heard that Brent Leatherwood was forced out too. Here's what he said. Shameful and disgraceful. A great Christian man who lived through his children barely surviving a school shooting. Southern Baptist, how much more of this are you going to let go on? You cannot pretend not to see what is happening in your name, which is a fair point. Like, again, if you're going to get rid of this guy for saying something nice about Biden, like, what the hell is wrong with you? What do you want him to say? Do you want all Southern Baptist leaders to just sound like Trump's Truth Social account at this point? So, to answer his question, though, hey, Southern, what did he say? Southern Baptist, how much more of this are you going to let go on? I can answer that for you. They're going to let it go on indefinitely because this is who they are. They are patriarchal bigots who prioritize cruelty over decency. They like authority figures, men, always men, not because they might be a compassionate person, but because they're willing to criticize a compassionate person, especially one who cedes power to a woman, a black woman, no less. So, like, I guess the thing that's most surprising to me is that anyone in these circles is surprised by what happened. Of course, it was going to happen. If you said, I'm glad Biden, had some compassion and decency, but I'm glad he's not going to be president anymore, they would go after you too for being too nice to him. And yet, the story is not done yet. Why? Because everything I just told you, the firing of him, that happened on Monday. By Tuesday morning, the same group had issued a brand new statement. And now it takes a whole different turn. Look at this. An early morning release from the ERLC Executive Committee says, as members of the ERLC's Executive Committee, we formally retract the press release which was sent yesterday, the one that said Leatherwood was fired. Take it back. Reverse it. Never happened. There was not an authorized meeting, vote, or action taken by the Executive Committee. Kevin Smith, not the director, but like the head of their board, has resigned as chair of the Executive Committee. So just to recap here, They had fired Brent Leatherwood because I guess he was nice to Biden, though they didn't say that. And now they're saying, nope, sorry, he's still in his job. Kevin Smith, the guy who runs our executive committee, he made that decision by himself, and now he's fired. So they got rid of the guy who made the decision to fire the other guy. And honestly, at this point, I'm just like, let him fight. Looks like no one there knows what's going on. Looks like nobody's in charge. Uh, this is their official press release on the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission's page. This is it as of July 23rd. Kevin Smith has resigned. Brent Leatherwood remains the president of the ERLC and has our support moving forward. Which, that's a wild thing to say. You know, Brent Leatherwood's like looking behind his back the entire time now. But what the hell's going on at this point? Who's in charge here? How did one guy make a decision like this and just decide this is such an important matter that I don't need to talk to the other members of my committee. I'm just going to go ahead and fire the guy. I'm going to send a memo to our communications person and say, hey, fire the dude. He did a thing. I'm just going to do that by myself. Like, what the hell is going on in your mind to do that? Now, Kevin Smith, the guy who made that decision, he also issued another statement. Let me show that to you. This is from Christianity Today, which did really good reporting on this. On Tuesday morning, after the press release was sent out reversing everything, Smith apologized in a since deleted post on X. The trustees of the ERLC steward the entity on behalf of Southern Baptists. In leading them, I made a consequential procedural mistake. The executive committee and other trustees are Christ-honoring volunteers who give much. The mistake was mine. I apologize. Now I'm going to delete this post because I apologized and that's not manly, so I got to get rid of it apparently. What strikes me here is this guy thought whatever Brent Leatherwood did was so big of a deal, he had to act immediately. Doesn't want to run this by anybody else in power. He's just like, got to act now. He was nice to Biden. And the weird thing is, at no point in any of this did anyone say Leatherwood was fired because of what he said about Biden, which means either Kevin Smith, the guy who is no longer there, decided what he said about Biden was such a big deal that he had to get rid of him by himself immediately, or there's some other scandal brewing about Leatherwood that we don't even know about yet that made this guy act immediately, and then it just turned out to be a horrible coincidence that makes everybody look bad. So this is where we are at as I make this video right now. I still don't know why they initially fired the guy, but he's back in charge and he hasn't really said anything about it. Even religion reporters can't seem to break through to figure out what the hell's going on here. And the guy who was the executive committee chair has now resigned and he's not talking. He's deleting tweets. So just a glorious way to watch them self-destruct in real time over the course of a couple days.